Well, welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed lunch. And we're lucky in Athens that we can enjoy things like that. So as we begin our afternoon, we have two speakers this afternoon. Our first of the afternoon is Wendy Ledbetter, who has a long history of working on the preservation of forest ecosystems from Florida to Colorado to Texas, and particularly in the Southeast. She's worked with the Longleaf pine ecosystem, about which William Bartram waxed rhapsodic on so many occasions. For much of her career, she worked with the Nature Conservancy, and in late 2021 came to work with the Longleaf Alliance as its partnership coordinator for the Alliance's work on the Fort Stewart and Altamaha region. And if you've ever visited Fort Stewart, as I have, and got to watch them do a prescribed burn with helicopters, which combines the best thing in the world, which is fire and helicopters, it's unforgettable. In this area, there are partners both at Fort Stewart and in the lower Altamaha River area working together to restore over 16,000 acres of longleaf pine habitat with prescribed fire, and also doing replantings on public and private lands in Southeast Georgia to benefit a whole array of forest animals and plants, including the gopher tortoise, the eastern indigo snake, the northern bobwhite quail, and other open pine and grassland dependent species. The partnership not only focuses on managing the extensive longleaf pine forest, but also conducts a great deal of outreach, very effective outreach to community partners, especially through their educational activities for young people. So with that, glad to have you here, Wendy. Welcome.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. I've joined other conferences before, and it's always a great group of people to meet with and talk about conservation and art and history. And I'm very happy to be here to tell you a little bit about the work here in Georgia. My encounters and my experiences with Bartram and knowing about William Bartram and his travels really tie back to when I was running around the woods as a young kid up in Pennsylvania, maybe as Bartram might have, being from Philadelphia area. And these were the natural history books that were in the coffee table and on the bookshelf at my grandfather's cabin. And that's how I first started my interest in nature and pursuing a career in wildlife biology. And then my connection with working as a park ranger for 8 years, I worked and lived at Paynes Prairie, which many of you know, in Gainesville, Florida. So helped round up scrub cows like you see in the picture, did vegetation monitoring in waste and sometimes chest high water lotus, or American lotus. So this is how I learned about Bartram and grew to love the topic and the things that we're talking about. For today, of course, many of you are experts on the travels of Bartram in Georgia, and I am new to Georgia in terms of my work. I was out in Texas for 29 years. I worked in Florida for a long time, but right now as the Fort Stewart Altamaha Partnership Coordinator, I'm stationed in Georgia and in Savannah. And so even though many of the species and habitats are familiar to me, I'm still in a learning process myself. Of course, we know that Bartram came to Savannah and then made his way to Northeast Georgia and North Georgia and chronicled his work or his travels up in that area. And so some of the information I'm going to share with you today does reference to the Chattahoochee Oconee National Forest area. A lot of the similar work, similar interests and habitats of the species that folks are concentrating on in Georgia. So just for today, I'm not going to concentrate on that Chattahoochee forest area, but know that there's been some restoration work that's centered on longleaf pine and shortleaf pine, and of course, protecting and conserving mixed hardwood forests and those special communities, some of those you've heard about today. And that I know that with some recent work, they've used some national Forest Foundation funds to plant longleaf and shortleaf in some of these areas. And so there's some other funding sources that we've also been using in our state and across the range. And that includes the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Arbor Day Foundation. So in terms of tree planting, those are the folks that we're doing quite a bit of work with. What I'm going to let you know about today is a little bit about the America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative, which is basically almost any public or private partner that is interested in longleaf restoration has teamed together through a series of conservation plans and strategies and goals to increase the amount of longleaf that's on the landscape, and to also do a lot of other management treatments, education, and training to up the numbers. And so for longleaf, there's been a lot of discussion about the decline of longleaf and why, but basically we know for most folks, we say there was approximately 90 million acres, and that it was reduced to less than about 3% of that original acreage across the landscape from Virginia to Florida to Texas. And so this is the 22 report that's just been out. We just received copies of it in the mail. And so you can see on these stats that are listed below on the amount of acreage that people have been working on. And so right now, the acreage of longleaf is at about 5.2 million. So by 2025, they wanted to get to 8 million, which we aren't going to do because that's a hefty goal. But the America's Longleaf Restoration Initiative and all the partners have decided we're still going to work on this, and we're still going to keep pushing forward with our numbers to up those stats every year. So the way that we're doing this, and Zach referenced to this about the need for partnership and resources to work together, there's about 18 different teams, and we have the South split up into significant landscape areas. And what they did was they evaluated the areas of longleaf and the acreage and looked at priority areas. And so some of those dots you can see in the amount of the size and the acreage, what they're concentrating on. And so in Georgia, Fort Stewart and the Altamaha area comes out as a big area. And then of course, Fort Benning, which is now known as Fort Moore with the recent name change. And so there's another partner I work with a lot with Lou Ann Creighton, and she's with the Chattahoochee Fall Line Partnership. And so, of course, longleaf goes along with fire. And this is a quote that people have been used a lot, and it really, I think, is very, it puts it right to the point. Taking fire out of the longleaf forest is like taking rain out of the rainforest. And that was a reported quote from Larry Landers, who was a fire and forest ecologist that worked in tall timbers and worked beyond. And it is essential for us to continue to use longleaf for our management. So at the Fort Stewart area, and this is just an example of how we're working that I'm going to share with you. So Fort Stewart is the largest Army installation east of the Mississippi River at 279,000 acres. And they have about 20 species that are threatened or endangered or at risk. And so really Fort Stewart for our area in Southeast Georgia, in our 5 million acre conservation area that we have identified, is a very critical like anchor point for our work. They've done a terrific job of putting, like Brenda said, under fire management using aerial ignitions. They do still do some hand grounds on burning for quail management areas to improve the habitat for quail. They've also done an incredible job of increasing their federally endangered red-cockaded endangered woodpecker clusters and populations. So they are one of the #1 in the state for having those birds, and they do a lot of translocations to other states to help supplement populations. And so they also focus on the lands around the preserve or around the installation. So a lot of those areas are used as buffer areas. They might not be in conservation traditional lands, but they're also lands that can be used to secure under protection, to make sure that the installation can still do the trainings. We can still use fire on the ground, and we can still function to manage the areas for wildlife and to still fulfill the training obligations that the installation has. Right now, we're looking at doing some amphibian survey and wetland pond assessment on the preserve or on the installation for the frosted flatwood salamander. So this is our partnership, and I won't read all these, but you can see, as Zach referenced to, and everyone knows these days, it's all about partnerships, agreements, memorandums of understanding, a charter. Right now, we're working on our 5-year conservation plan to refresh it and also refresh our mapping. And this is our new logo that we just created. So it's a mix of public agencies, NGOs, private partners, and landowners, and also business folks as well. This is the landscape that I'm working in with the partners. And if you see here, that is Fort Stewart. Savannah is over this way. So we're in about 27 counties in Southeast Georgia. And we also include the Townsend Bombing Range down here as well. And so this is the area where we're working to identify landowners who want to do longleaf work and work with us on restoration and management. Can I go back? Right. Did I? Nope. Okay. Sorry. So our restoration and management, it involves several different things, and a lot of different agencies and organizations are doing this. National Park Service, Forest Service, that includes the Chattahoochee, and also the Orion Society, which is a private nonprofit that focuses on reptiles. Also the industrial lands, some of the industrial land ownership, there's areas where we work on, and then of course private landowners. And private landowners are really what has been the concentration for a lot of these funding sources to help folks do the work on their land with cost share. And so prescribed burning operations, as Zach had mentioned, of course, growing season burns are critically important. In my 29 years on the cruise, we moved our burning operations from not just dormant season burns, but growing season burns to get better results in some areas where appropriate. And we also changed our frequency. Some people talk about 3 to 5 year burn rotations. And in some areas we were down to 18 months to 2 years to increase our frequency of fire on the landscape, with good results for influencing and increasing the response from the vegetation. And then, of course, reforestation is very popular right now. Jeff Bezos contributed a lot of money this year, as well as other corporate partners are interested in tree planting using containerized longleaf, which have a very successful success rate at 97, high 90s% compared to bare root. They cost more to put in the ground, but if managed properly, they give good results. We also, Zach mentioned, of course, the reference to invasive and non-natives. There's lots to pick from in the southeastern landscape. Name your favorite. But also, using those as a prioritized and strategy area to look at the worst areas of concentration and working strategically to manage those with either chemical or land management, hand treatments, a lot of labor-intensive work needed to control invasives, and there's many to pick from. We also work a lot on learning opportunities, whether it's academies that we offer by the Longleaf Alliance, trainings, workshops, webinars, education and outreach events to just let people know about the economic value and the potential for economic return, whether it's pine straw raking or long-term forest management with longleaf, because it is a long-lived species, and also the fact that people can get quality products, and as well as the aesthetic values, and also the recreational values like bobwhite quail, American woodcock, and turkey, deer, and all, of course, your value for your pollinators, and also your value for just wildflowers and aesthetics and biodiversity. So one of the big focuses that someone had asked about this morning, are we concerned about, plants coming from what areas? There is a lot of attention being paid to working on the proper ecoregion to get the right species in the right place, not to just get a mix that's from somewhere far away from you and putting it in the right ground. So a lot of the work right now, the partners are focusing on gathering seed, processing it correctly, testing it for quantity and quality to make sure it's good seed, and looking at the different species that are available locally, and then trying to work with the nursery business and other folks to make sure that seed is available to the public to use on their lands, or to reseed a right of way, or a highway project. And so there's a lot of emphasis on that. Out at Fort Stewart, we've collected seed with DNR and started what we call a wiregrass farm out there. So really paying attention and working with the native, the plant material centers that the Soil Conservation Service has as well, to make sure that we're all working together in a very logistical and effective manner. And of course, couldn't get away without talking about the gopher tortoise, a keystone species for this area. Of course, it occurs in several states, and it is a key species for the longleaf community. This is Bartram's discussion in some of his writing about the gopher tortoise, and he had more on it, which I couldn't put in here because of time, but he went into length about discussing about the tortoise. Of course, we know it harbors several different species, and it's a very important species for the longleaf system. One of the things that that we've talked about is trying to work with landowners who were, instead of worrying about threatened and endangered species, trying to keep a voluntary effort with landowners to work on gopher tortoise management and their lands. And so we've got several programs that help with folks who do cost share for burning and doing evaluation of their lands for gopher tortoise before they work on site. And so the whole idea behind this work is to keep that species off the endangered species list. And so we've been working across the range to do an initiative. And so this is several different groups and agencies and partners working to identify and make an area for 65 viable populations of gopher tortoise in Georgia. And it's really been a good program. Right now, they're about at 62 for the number of viable populations that have been secured. And that's a combination of private and public lands. And we also use that initiative to help contact landowners about multiple uses for their land, and not just for gopher tortoises, but for other species, to the benefit of other species as well. One of the things that that they're doing to help the gopher tortoise is with the Head Start program with Fish and Wildlife Service. And this is where they're basically, they're working with small or new gopher tortoises, hatching them out, and then releasing them at areas where they consider that they'll be protected and under conservation efforts. So right now, the acreage is still important on the quality and the quantity of acreage. Having increased burning and having good sites that are open, have vegetative material for the diet of the gopher tortoise is important. And having those areas that are widely spaced and not crowded out by hardwood shrubs is another key thing. So the other species, how you feel about snakes is, some people love them and some people don't. But the indigo snake is another keystone species, very important, tied to the gopher tortoise in the range of the Southeast. Has been, of course, decimated by a variety of factors, as you can imagine. And so this is another species that's been worked on quite a bit. And under this work, they're working on, this is the latest coloring book and some of the outreach stuff that's been going on with the indigo snake across the range. And of course, we have Burner Bob. So no, it is not a penguin. Let's start us out. But it is a bobwhite quail, and it was the idea of one of our folks working in Longleaf. And so a lot of outrage. This has been popular, as you can imagine, and we have a lot of swag that goes with it. But it's again an effective tool to work with folks across the range. And then I want to talk a little bit about river cane. This is just another interesting plant community that's been referenced to by Bartram. And I've just really been interested in it myself. There's the River Cane Initiative. And of course, we all know, as we've discussed before, about the demise of river cane and river cane breaks. Bartram references to it in his writings, of course, and so have other people through the ages. And so there's now a River Cane Initiative. There's been several folks that are working on it. And of course, ecologically and for function in terms of songbirds, the former passenger pigeon and the Carolina parakeet, as you see here, use these areas in terms of their ecological lifespan. And of course, the value of these areas for wetland, just wetland as value as wetland areas for filtering out soil and water elements and toxins and pollutants. And of course, the loss, about 98% loss. River cane, of course, culturally important, as we know, used for a lot of different items in traditional culture. And so now some of the key initiative areas that people are working on there's certain projects where they're working on growing out young nursery plants and doing some restoration work. These are some of the partners that I've gathered to see about working on these different projects across the range. And it's just a really good effort by a lot of different people to return some of these cane break the ecology to the sites. And then this is one that's going at the mounds they had just in removing the invasives first, and then adding the plant material that they're growing, and working with some of the young students and interns and other folks for restoration. And then I just saw, if you go on Facebook, there's a River Cane Initiative Facebook page, and it just noted a young woman, I think she's from Stroudsburg University up in Pennsylvania. So she's going to be doing a graduate project, and she just posted this map on site that she's going to be doing an assessment of 200, I don't know if she'll do them all, but 220 locations is what she's identified on that map, mostly in North Georgia, of river cane areas, probably a lot of different size variation in some of those, but she's going to be doing an assessment on those. So I just saw that this week on her posting. So that should be another interesting study to add to the information about River Cane Initiative. So that's kind of my summary for some of the restoration work that we're doing on the landscape, and wanted to invite anyone who needs additional material or interest. We've got a great Longleaf Alliance website. I have lots of printed materials on the value and ecology and function of longleaf systems, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the question was about the buffer zone around Fort Stewart. So that is it's not a physical buffer. It's identifying the acreage and areas around Fort Stewart where we could work with compatible development for the mission of Fort Stewart and the mission of the landowner. So sometimes it might be like an agricultural field or agricultural crops. And as opposed to development that would create a Walmart or a housing development. And then those people are going to get upset when you burn and that kind of thing. So it's called the ACUB program. It's Army compatible use development, around the Fort Stewart, and a lot of the military installations across the country do that. And so it's a way to work with landowners to protect the mission and the use, a lot of it prescribed fire, and of course, as you know, smoke management concerns, and with healthcare facilities and of that nature. Yes, sir.
And that's the same thing that you're speaking about also works for the Okefenokee Swamp. I know they were doing burns, and then the landowners were always complaining about some of the management practices there.
Yeah, this particular program is targeted with military installations, but yeah, almost everywhere in the conservation community, it's all about connectivity, and it's all about looking forward for land use activities, in particular liability for smoke management and, this wildland urban interface. And so the question is, what about Okefenokee? Yes, anywhere you have a large natural area and you're conducting prescribed burn operations, it's always good to look at the land use and see what you can do to mitigate that and to get ahead of that, so you can, to keep your ability to be able to conduct fire operations. Yes, sir. Sorry.
How extensive was your
I don't myself, I'm just kind of like diving into myself. I don't know the exact acreage. Maybe somebody in this room might know about it, but I know that it was dropped down to 98% of that. I don't know if they have a great sense of how many acres there was historically, but I know that it was reduced dramatically to 98%. And some of it was because of agricultural development in those bottomlands that we had talked about this morning. Yes, sir. Yeah, so one of the teams on that slide that I showed, the team or the dots, so we do have a mountain longleaf team. Yeah, we call them our longleaf or local implementation teams. So we do have a mountain team that's working specifically on mountain longleaf, which has additional challenges because of logistics, because of the environmental conditions, and just, even, trying to, do burns in that mountainous terrain or to do your harvest operations. So it's definitely part of the work that we're doing as over the longleaf community. And it's also a challenge in terms of making sure that they have the amount of, I know I had like guys contacting me about where can I get mountain longleaf seedlings, because it's definitely a difference. Again, looking at that importance of ecotype and range for, getting the right species, getting your local seed sources to fill in that area. Yes. Anyone else? Hey, Wade. Last one. Okay. Uh-huh.
While you were on that western side of the state, along the partnership,
Mhm. Right.
and I think because this Bartram complex is worth mentioning, that's kind of another great overlay of Bartram on Longleaf conservation and restoration in southeast in Georgia. Traveled in 1775 from Georgia across the river to Chattahoochee, and straight through what is now the Chattahoochee Fall Line.
Right.
A lot of that under conservation easement handled up by the state of Georgia, handled up by the Nation Service.
Yes.
A lot of that same restoration. Another example of that partnership. corridor to Pittsburgh, Buffalo, where in 1970, new organization, erected a monument, Bartram, because they felt like it was right. It's now unprotected by this. That's just a landscape I want to add to your great story.
Yes. And I appreciate it. Yeah, I can't repeat all that because we're out of time, but yeah, definitely acknowledge, yeah, Luann Creighton over in Columbus and the Chattahoochee partnership that I mentioned today. So yeah, we have a great effort that's going from Columbus across the partnership or the fall line area as well. So